All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the biggest, most persistent conspiracy theories of all time, the idea that the moon landing was completely faked. You've heard those words a million times, right? They marked this absolutely monumental achievement for humanity. But for a whole lot of people, those famous words are just the opening line to a massive, colossal deception. So let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. We'll look back at the mission itself. Then we'll get into the so-called proof of the conspiracy. After that, we'll bring in the science to see what holds up, look at the actual proof that we went, and finally, try to understand why this idea just refuses to go away.
Okay, so first things first. To really get why people started having doubts, we have to go back to the beginning and set the stage for what happened on that incredible day back in 1969.
So you've got this amazing moment, the Saturn V launch, the Eagle landing. The whole world is just glued to their TVs. It was a huge triumph. But then, just a few years later, in 1976, this writer, Bill Kaysing, publishes a book basically arguing the whole thing was staged by NASA in a secret studio to win the space race.
And you know what? The idea really took off. Over the years, polls have shown that a pretty shocking number of people all over the world, in the US, in Britain, even in Russia, are convinced the landing was faked. So, what is this supposed evidence that's been fueling all this doubt for decades? Let's take a look at the most common arguments you'll hear from people who think it was all just a Hollywood production. First up, the big one, the flag. This is probably the most famous piece of evidence. You see the photo, and the flag looks like it's rippling. So the question is, how can a flag wave when there's no wind on the moon? Next, they tell you to look at the sky in the photos. And what do you see? Absolutely nothing. Just this deep, black emptiness. The argument is that if they were really on the moon, that sky should be bursting with brilliant, unfiltered stars. Then you've got the lighting. In some of the pictures, the shadows from the astronauts and the equipment just don't look parallel. So the claim is that this proves the scene was lit up by multiple studio lights, not just the sun. And finally, the big science-y question, the Van Allen belts. These are zones of intense radiation around the Earth. So how could any human being pass through them without getting a fatal dose of radiation? To the believers, it's just not possible. You know, all these questions sound pretty convincing when you first hear them, but the moment you start applying a little bit of basic physics and photography, the whole proof thing starts to completely unravel. That waving flag? Yeah, it wasn't weaving, it was just wrinkled. NASA knew a normal flag would just hang there limply, so they built it with a horizontal rod across the top to make it stand out. The ripples you're seeing are just the creases from being packed up so tightly for the trip.
And the missing stars? This one's actually just basic photography. The lunar surface was lit by the blazing hot sun, making it incredibly bright. To expose the photo correctly for the astronauts, the camera settings had to be in a way that just couldn't pick up the faint light of distant stars. It's the exact same reason you don't see stars during the daytime here on Earth.
Those weird non-parallel shadows aren't proof of studio lights, they're proof of an uneven surface. The moon isn't a flat floor. It's covered in craters and hills and slopes. When a single light source like the sun hits a bumpy landscape like that, the shadows will stretch and bend over the terrain, creating an optical illusion.
And that supposedly deadly radiation? Well, when you look at the actual numbers, the argument just crumbles. NASA wasn't flying blind. They plotted a course that shot through the weakest parts of the Van Allen belts, and they did it really fast. The total radiation dose they got was tiny, about the same as a single chest X-ray. It was completely safe. Okay, so we've torn down the myths. But forget that for a second. There is an absolute mountain of hard physical evidence that proves, without any shadow of a doubt, that we went to the moon. Let's start with something you can hold in your hand. Well, not you, but scientists. 382 kilograms. That's 842 pounds of moon rocks that the Apollo astronauts brought back to Earth. And these rocks are special. They've been analyzed by thousands of scientists all over the globe, including in the Soviet Union, who would have loved to expose a US hoax. These rocks have tiny little impact craters from micrometeorites and a total lack of water in their structure. You literally cannot create those conditions on Earth. They are impossible to fake. And we don't even have to rely on evidence from 1969. Since 2009, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has been taking super high-resolution pictures of the moon, and you can clearly see the Apollo landing sites. You can see the bottom half of the lunar landers, the scientific instruments, and you can even see the paths the astronauts walked. Their footprints are still there. And this might be the single biggest nail in the conspiracy's coffin. It wasn't just NASA's orbiter. Satellites from China, Japan, and India have all independently photographed the landing sites and confirmed the artifacts are there. You really have to ask yourself, why would America's biggest competitors help cover up a fake instead of exposing it for the biggest propaganda win in history?
This is maybe the coolest proof of all. The Apollo astronauts left special mirrors on the moon's surface. And for over 50 years, observatories right here on Earth have been shooting lasers at them. The lasers bounce back, which lets us measure the exact distance to the moon with incredible precision. They still work perfectly today.
So, with unfakeable rocks, photos from rival countries, and lasers that are still working, the evidence is it's overwhelming. Which brings us to the real mystery. Why do so many people still believe it was a hoax? Well, the answer has more to do with psychology than with evidence.
It's really a perfect storm of things. The theory got its start in an era of massive distrust in the government. A lot of people today just can't wrap their heads around 1960s technology being that advanced. And finally, there's just human nature. Once you publicly say you believe something, it's really, really hard to admit you are wrong, no matter what the evidence says.
So, in the end, the moon landing isn't just about a stunning achievement. In this age of misinformation we live in, it stands as one of the most thoroughly documented, independently verified events in all of human history. It's a powerful reminder of what we can accomplish for sure, but maybe more importantly, it's a benchmark for what real, verifiable proof actually looks like.